everyone, this series is about authentication in Express.js. So we will use Passport.js. This is the authentication middleware in Node.js. So it supports a wide range of authentication methods such as local authentication or OAuth and JWTs. And it can work with stateless tokens like JWT, and it stores the user session, allowing the user to remain logged in across several requests. So to set up the local authentication with Passport, we need to install several packages. So we need to install Passport, Passport local, Express session, okay, using command npm I. Okay, so let's go to the code. We will see how Passport.js will work as an authentication in Express.js. So firstly, we need to import the Express framework. Okay, so how we import it? We will use const express is goes to require express. Okay, so this is how we import the modules. Okay, so now next step is we need to import passport.js for authentication. Import passport.js for authentication. Okay, const passport require passport. Okay, so we have imported passport. So next step is we need to import the session middleware to manage the user sessions. Import session middleware, because we are doing stateful authentication. We need to store the user ID in the server to authenticate. Import session middleware to manage user sessions. Okay, so how we import it? Const session is equals to require, then express session. Okay, now what we need to do? We need to import the local strategy. Import the local strategy module. Strategy module from Passport.js for local. Why we need it? For local username password authentication. Username password authentication. Okay, so we will store it in variable const local strategy. Okay, equals to require passport local dot strategy. Okay, so we have imported the local strategy module from passport.js for local user name password authentication. Okay, so next step is we need to create an Express application. We have imported the required modules. Now we need to create an Express application. Okay, so this is the syntax. Okay, so now what we need to do? We need to create a middleware to pass the incoming request bodies. Middleware. Okay, so this is the middleware to pass incoming request bodies. Okay, middleware app.use. Okay, extend it to. Okay, so for now we can make it false. Okay, so now what we need to do? We need to configure the session middleware for session management. We have imported the session middleware, so now we need to use it. Okay, we need to configure it. Configure session middleware. for session management. So app.use, this is how we use middleware app.use. Okay, then session. So here we will add our secret key. So any secret key, you can say like you can use it of any of your choice, and this should be, we need to make it a strong unique string. Okay, so the secret key, it should be strong. Okay, so why we use it? It is used to sign the session ID cookie. Used to sign the session ID cookie. Okay, so now what it contains? Secret, and second one, resave. It should be false. What will resave do? It will prevent the resaving. It will prevent resaving the session. If it has been, if it not been modified. Okay. So the next thing is we need to initialize the passport.js middleware. Okay. Initialize the passport.js middleware. Middleware. Okay. So we will use app.use passport.initialize. This is the syntax to initialize the passport.js middleware. So now we need to do enable the session support in passport.js. What we need to do? Enable session support in passport.js. How we do it? We will use app.use passport.session. Okay. This is how we enable the session support in passport.js. So now what we need to do? We need to configure the passport with local strategy for username password authentication. Okay. Configure passport with local strategy for username password authentication. Okay. So we will use passport.use new local strategy function, and it will take username password from the UI. From the, we can say that from the form it will take username and password. Okay, then done. If now we will check if username and password are valid or not. Okay, check if username and password are valid. Okay, so if username is equals to, we can say that test, it will check test. In the real scenarios, it will check it from the database. So now we are hard coding this in our code. So it will check for username is equals to test and password is equals to let's say password only. Okay. Okay, so now if it is valid, we need to return done. This is the syntax. Done null comma, let's say id1 comma username. Okay, else otherwise what it will do, it will return done false, null comma false. Okay, then it will throw a message that will be incorrect username password, username and password. Okay, so now what we need to do, we have configured the passport with local strategy for username password authentication. So now what we need to do, we need to serialize the user information to store in the session. Okay, what we need to do, we need to serialize the user information to store in the session. Okay, so why we need to serialize it? Because when a user is successfully authenticated, the user data needs to be saved in a session. To store the entire user object, it is inefficient. So what we need to do, instead of saving the entire user object, Passport serializes the user data to a unique identifier such as user ID. Okay, so what serialize do, it will save only the user ID in the session to keep it lightweight. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to serialize the user information to store in the session. So passport dot serialize user command done const users is equals to id 1 username, let's say it is test. Okay, so if id is equals to, user dot id, then what it will do, it will send done null comma user. So what it is doing, if the user is found, it will return the user object. If user is found, it will return user object. Okay, otherwise it will return false, else done null comma false. Okay, so it is done. Now what we need to do, we need to define a get route to serve the login form. So we will take it from here. We will copy this route, get route, app.get slash login. Okay, on this login and route, we will get this form. Okay, this is the login. Okay, let's say username, here it is, password, username, password. Here we will submit it. Type will be password. Sorry. Okay. So this is the structure of form. where method will be post. Okay. So now we need to define a post route for login form submission. Post route for login form submission. Okay. So app.post / login passport.authentication passport.authenticate, but it local. So it has two parameters. One is success redirect. If the user is authenticated, then it will be redirected to dashboard page. Okay. And if it is the failure case, if the user is invalid, it will be redirected to the same login page. Okay. So what it will go do? It will redirect to dashboard if authentication is successful. Authentication is successful. Otherwise, it will, in case of failure, it will redirect to the login page. Okay. So now redirect to the login page if authentication is unsuccessful. Okay. So now what we need to do, when it comes to the dashboard page, we need to define a get route for the dashboard. So it will be accessible only to the authenticated users. So now what we will do, we will define a get route for dashboard page. Okay. That will be accessible to authenticated users. Okay. So app.get endpoint is dashboard q.res. So if req dot is authenticated, so if it is authenticated, then what we need to do, we need to send res dot send welcome to dashboard page. Okay. But we will send welcome to dashboard. Okay. H1, we will highlight that welcome to dashboard. Okay. Okay. Otherwise, if it is not authenticated, it will be on the same page. Res dot, it will go to the same page, redirect to login route. Okay. So the final step will be, we need to start the server. Let's go to the terminal. So what error we are getting, we need to debug it. Identifier user has already been declared. Okay. This identifier user has already been declared. Okay, we need to here deserialize it. Okay, so we are here deserializing it. We need to serialize the user information. So passport dot, we need to first serialize it. Passport dot serialize user dot done, user comma done, null comma user dot id. So what we are doing here, only the user ID stored in the session, only the user ID stored in session. Okay, so now let's run the code. Okay, okay, here we need to pass ID because we have serialized it. Now we are passing ID into deserializer. Object body parser is not defined. Okay, let's check. We can use Express also. So now let's run the code again. Okay, so now server is running on port localhost 3000. So before going to the browser, I need to explain why we are doing serialization and deserialization. So the purpose of serialization, where we are doing, okay, here. So the purpose of serialization, it is used for the, like, when a user is successfully authenticated, the user data needs to be saved in the session. And instead of saving the entire user object, what Passport.js do, it serializes, means it reduces the user data to a unique identifier such as user ID in this case. Okay, so instead of saving the whole user object, it is saving the only the user ID stored in the session. Okay, so once it is stored, then we need to deserialize it. Okay, so when a request is made, the session contains only the serialized user identifier. To access the user's detail for authentication or authorization, the application needs to retrieve the full user object. Okay, so how will it will get the full user object? It will use that identifier. Okay, it will use the identifier to get the full user object. So if ID matches the user ID, then it will get the full user object. Okay, so what deserialize do? It will fetch the full user details using the ID when it is needed. Okay, so now let's go to the browser. Let's go to the login page, login route. Okay, so we are getting the username and password. Okay, we'll use a break statement. We are same here. Okay, let's run the code again. So let's username, let's give it 123 and password 345, then submit. So it is coming to the same login page because we are giving the incorrect username and password. And in our code, what we have saved, username is test and password is password. Only then it will be authenticated. So let's go to the browser. Username, enter test, and password is password. Okay, then click on submit. Okay, it is not authenticated. Let's check it again. False. Save and initialize. It should be false. Let's run the code again. Test, password is password. So let's check the code again. What is left? Okay, name is equals to username. Yeah, and name should be password, small p. Okay, let's check it again. Username is test, password is password, test, password. So it is authenticated successfully. Okay, welcome. Welcome to the dashboard page. So now if we go to again login page, if we enter incorrect username and password, it will redirect to the same login page. Okay, and if we give the correct username and password, test and password, so it will redirect to the dashboard page. So this is all about the authentication and authorization in Express.js applications. So here we are using the Passport.js. This is the authentication middleware in Node.js. So we are firstly importing the modules. Then we are importing the Passport.js module for the authentication. Then what we are doing, we are importing the session middleware to manage the user sessions. Okay. Then we are importing the local strategy module from Passport.js for local username password authentication. Then we are initializing the Express application. Then we are using the middleware to pass form data. Okay. Then we are configuring the session middleware for session management. After that, we are initializing the Passport.js middleware using app.use passport.initialize. This is the syntax to initialize the Passport.js middleware. Then we are enabling the session support in Passport.js using app.use passport.session. This is the syntax. Then we need to configure the passport with local strategy for username password authentication. After that, we need to serialize the user information to store in the session. Then we need to deserialize the information. Okay. So then we are creating a login route. Okay. So when we go to the login endpoint, we will get the form. And after clicking on submit, this action /login with post method, it will be called. And if user is successfully authenticated, it will go to the dashboard page. Otherwise, it will redirect to the login page. And this is the route for the dashboard page. Welcome to dashboard. This response will come, else login page. Then we are starting the server. Okay. So this is all about Passport.js. And yes, I will be sharing the whole code in my GitHub repository. So I'm sharing the link in the description. You can take the code from there.